Welcome to the Awakened Parent Project, conscious conversations, empowered parenting with me, Susan Dolci. It's time to open our hearts and our minds to what it means to be a parent, exploring and expanding the ways we communicate, validate, and show up daily for our kids. With a parent-centric focus, you learn to become more present, a better active listener, more reflective, more engaged, and mutually empowered. Parenting isn't about perfection. It's about presence, honesty, self-compassion, unconditional love, and conscious communication. The Awakened Parent Project starts now. Hey everybody, welcome to the Awakened Parent Project. I'm your host, Susan Dolci. I'm a certified parent coach with the Jai Institute for Parenting, and it's my hope that you will find this a safe space to journey on a path of both practical and spiritual self-exploration. From the time my first daughter was born in 1994, I've been driven by a vision where children are nurtured both physically and spiritually by adults who are present, grounded, and empowered. I believe that conscious communication, self-exploration, and self-forgiveness are the tools that enable parents to foster deep, lasting connections with their children. Parenting isn't about perfection. I hope everybody knows that. I'm going to say it again at the end of the show. It's not about perfection. It's about presence, honesty, self-compassion, unconditional love, and conscious communication. And today we are diving into the realms of mindful parenting, one of my favorite topics of all time, with mindful parenting and conscious parenting. My guest today is certified mindfulness instructor Cheryl Blackington. Cheryl has been teaching mindfulness and mindful self-compassion and mindful parenting for the past 9 years. She's completed training and is certified for numerous programs, such as Mindful Schools, Mindful Self-Compassion for Youth, Koru for the college age, and mindful parenting. She's a retired public school teacher and became affiliated with the Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness 5 years ago. Cheryl is a parent and now a grandparent, and I thought she had a new grandbaby, but she's got older grandchildren and has applied her mindfulness knowledge with her own family. She sees these mindfulness skills as essential life skills, which continue to enhance her life as she continues her own practice and personal growth. She brings her own daily personal practice, her learnings and deepenings from attending silent retreats, and further knowledge gained by a great deal of reading on mindfulness-related matters to her classes. She passionately believes that everyone can benefit from this training. Hi, Cheryl. Welcome to the show. It's so good to have you back. Before we get started, Cheryl has generously offered a giveaway of one free youth class or ADHD Mindful Parenting Class to the first caller. So that number is 1-800-930-2819. And if you call that number, you're going to talk to Jamie and give Jamie your information, and we'll pass that on to Cheryl, and she will connect you with your one free class. There's several youth classes to choose from, aren't there, Cheryl?
Yeah, they are being formed right now, but generally there's middle school, high school, and because we are still virtual, I was hoping to go in person this fall, but I'm not going to do that. There won't be any elementary right now. I've just found that virtual with elementary is just too much.
Yeah, I think virtual school with elementary was just too much, but that's a topic for last year's show that we talked about.
I have to go there again.
Yeah. So mindful parenting. So can you share with our listeners, if they're not familiar with the term mindful parenting, how is mindful parenting different from like regular parenting? What are some of the basic tenets of mindful parenting?
Yeah, well, you actually described it quite beautifully in your introduction. And, I would say that mindful parenting is this idea that we can become aware of our children as unique individuals, and we can see what their needs are and what their feelings are, and we can stay tuned into ourselves too. So I have found this to be a lifetime journey of how do we stay in balance and grounded with ourselves through all of the triggers that we have as we parent, and then also stay in tune with our kids. And so mindful parenting is this fine dance between noticing ourselves and our kids and relationship with our partners, and how do we respond with compassion and kindness to our children and family.
And presence. I mean, I think that's one of the, in the work that I have been doing with the Jai Institute for Parenting, we talk a lot about co-regulation, self-regulation and co-regulation, and how children are not really capable of self-regulating up until a certain age. And that really does fall on the parent to, get present and embodied. What do you have to say about co-regulation and that sort of thing?
I think that is, I combine self-compassion and the co-regulation. It all seems for me to really work together. But I will just, a couple of thoughts come to my mind about that. I remember when I started out being a middle school teacher, I had no kids. There was a huge difference of my understanding of the needs of those kids and what they were able to do versus when I had my own. And I started seeing it through different eyes. And what we forget is that children really have different brains than we do. In fact, all the way up as we parent, their brains are changing as teenagers. But still, we kind of expect them just to be little people with the same, capabilities that we have as adults, which is not at all true. We are there as their guide, as their mentor, as their, establishing those boundaries for them, and the guidance, and all of that is really what we need to understand with our kids. And so it really does involve understanding, the maturational pieces or growth pieces of our kids and who we're working with. But to remember, we're not there to be their best friend. We do want to have a connection. We do want to be, have this presence with them, as you've mentioned. But, if we're going to go along with everything they want, then that's not what they need. They need someone to guide them and to have that firm, loving presence with them. And so mindful parenting, sometimes I think people get confused that, oh, it's just this loosey-goosey, newy-agey thing, that's not for me. But it really takes into this whole holistic approach to really seeing our children and who they are at their different growth levels.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you brought that up, because I guess I've been reading and studying mindful parenting for so many years now, that it didn't occur to me till you brought that up. But yes, it is not power under parenting. It's not permissive parenting. It's about connection, right?
Yes.
And because if we think about, I was working with a client just recently, and we were talking about how when she's triggered, like her trigger is if her kids are fighting, there's two boys. And she immediately goes into a power under sort of freeze mode, because she doesn't know what to do. And she's just so triggered. And I mentioned to her, I said, how when you're in a power over parent struggle thing, if you're going to say something stupid, you're going to lash out, or you're going to yell, or you're going to flip your lid, or whatever. We always think we have to count to 10, right, before we say something we're going to regret. And I said to her, the same thing applies in those times where you're in a power under, when you are, throwing up your hands and you're like, I can't deal with this, that it's still about if you can get present in your body, and it's still about, your nervous system, that you can put yourself in a place where you can not control the situation, but manage the situation in a place of clarity versus, power over and demanding or power under and freezing.
Yeah, definitely. And also in a similar terms that you're mentioning, if, we can one piece of mindfulness is if we can begin to understand when we're triggered and what it really feels like in our body. And so I've been doing more and more embodiment work as this time goes on, and understanding the importance of what does it feel like in my body when I am triggered? What parts of me are tightened? Sometimes it's all in our head, or we're just really overthinking, or maybe it's our heart, or in our belly, or our arms or jaw, whatever pieces. Everybody reacts differently. But if we can use that, which takes a lot of practice to try to give us clues as to what's happening, it might be able to just give that little bit of a wedge for us to step back from this amygdala reactive mode. And like you say, have a few breaths. And then I also teach in mindful parenting that, as you mentioned, nobody's perfect. We are going to mess up all of the time. And I, in hindsight, wish I would have been a mindful parent. I had no idea about mindful parenting. And I still apologize to my daughter to this day about, oh, I'm so sorry I did this. But the truth is we all make mistakes. And that's where self-compassion comes in, is that we can give ourselves the love and forgiveness that we need, but also move towards our kids, like move with them and be with them in their pain and in our pain. And often that's a lesson, it's like, okay, mom, I just blew it, and I'm so sorry. This is what I was feeling like in my body, and I just spouted off, and here's what I'd rather do. And then a do-over is what we talk about. Just let's try this again when we're all calm, whatever agreed upon moment that might be.
Yeah, I used to call those my bad mommy moments. And I would say, I'm so sorry for my bad mommy moment. It's a bit, but I'm human. And I think that's the beauty part of of approaching your children and saying, you know what, I'm the adult, I should have handled that better. I messed up. I'm sorry. Without necessarily seeking an apology. I mean, not with forgiveness. I mean, without necessarily seeking forgiveness. And but I think that to me, that was one of the keys to staying connected to my kids when they were growing up, was like just saying, "Wow, like
Mhm.
I didn't do that very well, did I?" And they'd be like, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sorry."
Yeah, and I think sometimes people feel like an apology is a loss of power as a parent, or like I'm not the authoritarian figure. I'm losing, my assertiveness, or over these kids, my kids. But really, in any situation I can think of, when I have said I'm sorry to somebody, it just brings me closer to that person. It
Mhm.
allows me to be human and for them to give me their honest feedback. And I think it's a really powerful thing we can do, whether we're parents or not. Hard to do
Yeah.
at times, but if it becomes more of the norm as a parent, then we model for our kids that they can too say they're sorry. They understand that they're not expected to be perfect, that, we all are just learning and trying to do the best we can. There's that.
Mhm.
The title of my parenting is Presence, Not Perfection. And it was exactly what you mentioned at the introduction.
Yeah. It teaches everybody that vulnerability is okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
We're up on a break. We're talking, I am talking with Cheryl Blackington today. She is a certified mindfulness expert and teaches mindful parenting classes at the Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness. She also has them on her website, which we will talk about more when we come back. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project. Hey, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project. I'm Susan Dolci, and I'm chatting with Cheryl Blackington today. She is a certified mindfulness expert, and we're talking about mindful parenting in particular today, which is a passion of both of ours. We're both very fired up about this topic. But I want her to share her website, but I want to remind everybody that she's giving away one free youth class or ADHD mindful parenting class to the first caller, and that number is 800-930-2819. And you talk with Jamie, and we will get your information passed along to Cheryl, and she will connect you to. So you changed your website name.
Good.
So let's tell everybody what your new website name is.
All right. Well, if I could just tell a little tiny story with it, my website was, and my business was called Teens Just Breathe. And that's because when I started this 10 years ago, I worked with middle school and high school students, and I thought that's all I'd ever want to do in the mindfulness realm. And now here we go, 10 years later. Sometimes you don't know where life is going to take you. And I work with people of all ages and sizes, and businesses and such. And so I was really looking for a name that would encompass more of what I did, and also more of my belief system. And so Mindful Muse came up as the Muse is spelled MEUS. I was trying to show how we are balancing our individuality with a larger collective, and how we are all connected as a community. And I've really been placing a lot of importance on this connectivity that we have, that mindfulness teaches us, that we're never alone. So for all of us, and parents in particular, we are never ever alone. We always have this extended community that's surrounding us, and it's important to not forget that. So that's how that name came about. And now I finally have my Facebook, my website, and my email are all finally lined up.
And so that's mindful dash muse, spelled as she was saying, MEUS, mindful dash muse, MEUS.com.
Mhm.
Okay, so back to mindful parenting. So how is mindful parenting different from getting advice on how to manage individual behaviors?
Yeah, well, when I was parenting, there were books that were giving you like A, B, C, D, E. If they do this, do that. If they do this, do that. And I would read these books and it would go absolutely nuts. It's like, nobody could possibly keep track of all of these different steps that you're supposed to do. And so that I found did not work out well for me. And as time evolved, and I've spent time as a teacher working with parents, and then on my own personal life, I discovered the mindful parenting piece is more of a framework that's adaptable to all people. So, depending on what your parenting style is or what your values are, you can hang your hat on these a larger framework as
Mm,
long as you understand what the big pieces are, which we've talked a lot about already, which are being present, being connected, replacing the judgment with curiosity. You know, we often assume why our kids are acting the way they are, but we may be wrong. It may be based on our own just judgment or our own past history or how our parents taught us. So bringing curiosity into the picture rather than judgment, and really learning how to be compassionate with ourselves, learning how to regulate ourselves, and then help our children regulate. So that's really the big picture of mindful parenting. And another thing I incorporate when I teach the class is also delving into our value system. So often in trying to line it up with our parenting style. So often we just do a rehash of what we were taught as kids. So we can't be intentional about what's really important to us and what our outcome might be for our children. Probably the biggest one being someday we want our kids to be independent. So how can we develop and hone our teaching with our children and our guidance so that someday that happens? So that's just an example of one of the values that the end value that we might have as a mindful parent. So we can keep our eye on the big picture more, give ourselves lots of compassion, forgiveness for mistakes that we make, and kind of keep our eye on the prize and what's important, rather than
mhm.
the little tiny nitpicky things that could drive everybody nuts. But is it really what's really important to us in the big picture?
One of the things I learned it was it, I'm surprised I never put two and two together in this regard. Um, but maybe it's because I always struggled with setting boundaries. But what I learned about values is that as a family, our boundaries are driven by our values. And it's kind of hard to have the boundaries if you don't know the values, right? So I love that you walk parents through that, because you can say like this behavior or this, if I don't like to use the word behavior because behavior is a sign of an unmet need. But if, let's just say, coming home from, missing curfew, like this behavior is not acceptable because we have a value in this house where we respect everybody's time and we don't want people to worry. But if you don't have those values in place, you're just kind of saying, because I said so.
Mhm, mhm. Definitely, and that's something I've read across some books with by John Payne, who I really really like, and
Mhm.
he talks a lot about that. How are we setting those boundaries? And when we set those boundaries, they need to be, like you say, aligned with our values, and then those are the values. But we actually talk about them. We don't just out of the blue, so because I said so, which carries no weight as we know. But it actually is a teaching moment. Here's what's important to our family, and this is how we're going to unfold as time goes on. And no matter what, we're going to come back to that value, and that's how we're going to decide how we're going to teach you to do a better job the next time.
Mhm.
And that just made so much sense to me as I was reading about it.
Yeah, he's also a huge proponent of, I am not segueing, sidetracking over a little bit, but he's a huge proponent of like unscheduling kids. And I
Yes.
love that. I absolutely love that. Like just getting back to, just good old family time and downtime. And it's okay to just do nothing.
Yeah,
We need more of that in our families today.
yeah, I agree.
So let's talk about self-compassion. We were talking a little bit about that in the prior segment. We were talking about, being able to say, I'm sorry. But so why is self-compassion critical to
Mhm,
mindful parenting?
mhm. Number one, we as parents expect so much out of ourselves. We want ourselves to be perfect, and so much of our self worth seems to be tied up in being a parent and worried about what others think about us as a parent, what our families think of us, whether our kids like us or not for what we're doing. So there's so much angst that happens as a parent, that we really need to give ourselves lots of grace. And really a huge component of what I do is constantly working on self compassion. Can we find a way to treat ourselves as we would our own best friend? What is our self talk to ourselves? Are we going, you're a stupid idiot, when you mess up? Or are we going, oh, you really didn't mean to do that. Oh, yeah, I can do better. And here's what I could do. And so that self talk too, that mindfulness can help unearth is what is that negative pattern that's going on in our minds. So giving ourselves that self compassion and that forgiveness and that kindness, and this understanding that we're not alone, that we're connected to others in this universe, really, um, is so important. And then for our kids too, as we alluded to earlier, they're just little beings, they are,
Yeah.
as irritating as a teenager might be, they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're programmed to move away from the nest, to become more independent, to disagree with you and push on our boundaries, all the things we find highly unpleasant. But that's what they're supposed to do. And as a parent, it's critical we understand that this is their role and what our role is. So we have those pieces in place, but also the forgiveness of them too. This always this kind interaction and connection with them. That's always more important than the corrections and the punishment, or however you want to name that. It always puts connections at the forefront. And how will I do a better job? How can I teach them what they need to learn?
Mhm.
Forefront.
Yeah. When I was going through the JI class, boy, talk about an opportunity for self-compassion, self-forgiveness, because I was probably one of the oldest. Maybe I was the oldest one in my cohort. um, so adult children. There was one other woman who had adult children, and uh, looking back on how parenting has changed. I mean, just even the concept of a timeout. And I was like, when I was reading about timeouts and how, it's you're basically the idea being now, it's like the child is disconnected from you and they can't be, and you think, no, I just want them to sit on the step till they learn what they've done. No, but in their heads, it's like, I can't be by mom or I can't be by dad. And I mean, I did that. I followed this one particular author. I won't say his name, but I put my child behind a gate, and I like I was right there, but it was like it was that separation that was the punishment. And now it breaks my heart when I think about what I did. And but that at the time, that was what everybody was doing. Like that was the standard, and that was um, kind and supposed to like train my child. And so when I was going through, I was like, wow, it's okay. My child turned out all right. She forgives me. She loves me. We have a great connection. But yeah, it's man, if there's one thing, like I say that in my intro all the time, self-compassion, self-forgiveness, because we're all going to make mistakes. We're just going to do it over and over. We're going to keep making mistakes. And as long as we just keep getting up and trying to do better the next time, that's what counts, right?
Absolutely. And I can so relate to you with the timeout. When I first learned about that, it was just, it was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. If you really think about what we're doing, we're sending them away,
Mm-hmm.
their bad selves. And what we're terming to be their bad selves are their anger or their frustration or any feelings that are really considered negative feelings.
Right.
Teaching them that those feelings are not okay. And that was just blew my mind when I
Yeah.
learned that.
Yeah.
It would be
Same.
so much more helpful for us, and I imagine we'll talk about this later, to teach our kids what to do with those uncomfortable feelings and ourselves what to do.
We're going to talk about that when we come back because at the bottom of we're at the half-hour mark. We're going to take another break. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project, and we'll be right back. I'm Susan Dolci. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project. Today, I am talking with Cheryl Blackington. She's a certified mindfulness instructor and queen of all things mindful parenting. and when we were in the break, we were chatting about how some people come to you that kind of they want to maintain that authoritarian sort of parent structure, but they also want something's obviously not working, right? And that's why they're coming to you for new techniques. So talk a little bit about that, because I just don't understand, like, if somebody were to approach me as a client and they wanted to stay in their authoritarian sort of style, I would say, well, then we can't work together, because what I do in my work is all parent-centric focused. It's on your limiting beliefs that you are bringing into your parenting, not your children's behavior, because that's not my problem. Like, I'm not here I can maybe provide you with some tips, but I'm here to help shift your perspective of what it means to be a parent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, we were saying during break, it feels like we're at the dawn of a new age. We're in the precipice between old ways of thinking and doing and newer ways of thinking and doing. And when I've taught classes, I often do have young parents who are just getting started. And so I have who are really embracing, they have not yet really had the experience of being a parent for very long. And then I have parents with older kids. And often there's one spouse who might be trying to embrace this mindful parenting idea, and they're trying to bring the other one along. It's like, look, here's what it's about. Here's what you might consider. And so what I've noticed is during the class, the parent who's dragging their feet kind of sits back with their arms folded and kind of skeptically listening. But as the class unfolds, they start realizing that their needs are not being met as well as their kids' needs are not being met. And whenever any of us can understand that we can receive and give self-compassion and that none of us are perfect. And I think one of the biggest ones is trying to figure out, how do we deal with strong emotions? That's what brings most parents into this, which, we all get triggered really easily, and we don't feel good after that. And then things blow up. And so I think some of those are the areas that help bring parents into this idea, even if we're feeling really skeptical about what mindful parenting might be. And to really understand that it's not a scary situation. It's really embracing ourselves and our kids in a much more human kind way. And that's kind of some of the things I see when parents come in with really trying to parent how their parents parent. And it's not a criticism of how their parents parented at all. It was part of that era, part of that time. Again, we were following the advice of experts, as we were doing that. But we are unfolding, and we are maybe progressing into this idea that we're here to really be loving guiders and teachers of our kids. And if that's so, how can we best do that to help them grow up and be happy adults?
Mm-hmm. Well, you said the key word, strong emotions, because I feel like I'm even remember my own childhood, like all the emotions were fine as long as it wasn't anger. You could be sad, but angry, no, angry was not allowed. I have a funny story that I don't know if I've shared it on this podcast, but when I was little, I don't think I would have gotten away with this when my dad was home. But my mom, we lived in a tiny little house, one bathroom, and the little bathroom was literally in the middle of the living room. And I would get mad and I would lock myself in the bathroom and scream all sorts of horrible things about my mother, or if I died, you wouldn't even come to my funeral, all those things, as I cleaned the bathroom from top to bottom. I'd get the Ajax and the scrubby pad and I would go to town. So my mom was okay with that, I think, because I cleaned the bathroom. So she didn't mind if I had strong emotions. But let's be real. I mean, what are some tips for parents? It's like if you haven't been able, if that's sort of been stifled in your family and you want to kind of change that narrative and let all the emotions be available, and if all emotions are just emotions and there's no good or bad emotion, how do you change that?
Yeah, and I am like a recovering person myself. I to this day have trouble with anger, like expressing anger. So I was very well programmed that way too. No anger in this house. So I go back to the body. I go
Mm,
back to how does this feel in your body? What does happiness feel like? And sometimes I show a thermograph where you've got a happiness and an emotional thermograph is all bright red and warm and fuzzy. And then you look at sadness, it's all blue. Anger is red all the way up, just like we're blowing our top. That's what you feel like. You're going to explode if it gets to be intense enough. And so we start investigating what the body feels like and how uncomfortable it feels to have these angry, frustrating, and we need to have a technique. We need to have a way to deal with it rather than throwing, kicking, hitting, and hurting other people, which still many adults even still do, because we don't understand. Many of us don't understand how to handle ourselves when we're triggered. And so I do go back to the body sensations. And I brought this out. I imagine you've probably seen this from the Center for Nonviolence, but I love this. This is the adults version. Has feelings listed on it.
mhm,
And you can get these kind of charts for little ones or depending on the age of your kids. And when you see with little ones, for instance, them behaving in a way that's explosive or angry, start attaching and naming the feeling with it, like, oh, when you're feeling all hot and you're sweaty and you want to burst, that's anger. Is that anger? And so teaching that to them and giving them that vocabulary over and over and over again, and then teaching them what they could do, which is things like move, run, play, punching bag, any way you can physically move. And that's really what you need to do when you're feeling really, really angry. And as you can bring it down or de-escalate that anger, that would be the time once people are calm again. And then we can teach them what it feels like to be calm in our body,
mm,
and it's looser. We're not all tight in our chest and breathing through our chest. And when we feel calmer, what does it feel like? And then that's a time for teaching moments. And so often, when kids are having a temper tantrum, we yell and scream at them as parents. So we're both yelling and screaming and escalating our amygdala reaction, which is nothing more than a scientific, here's what our body's doing. And that's helpful for us to know too, to stop the judgment of, well, we have the amygdala that's overreactive. And until we can calm that, that's what's going to be in charge. So everybody needs to take a breath and find a way to calm. And that's just a few things of what I might do.
yeah, it's great advice. Because I did not know. I think there are 7 basic emotions, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then all the other feelings that come from those 7 basic emotions. And I love what you're talking about because vocabulary is so important. I even find this with in my life coaching, that people have such a hard time defining a feeling.
Mhm.
They're like, be like, well, I'm sad. Well, how? Like it could be grief, it could be depression, it could be. And so to have that, like just to look at those words to help just for your own
Yeah.
introspection, to
Yes.
connect with what's really happening. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I so agree. I've had this list. I don't know. I had moved my office, so I must have done something with my list, but I've had it posted in my office. There's a feelings associated with met needs like grateful, hopeful, inspired. And then there's feelings associated with unmet needs like anger, confusion, and disquiet. And
Mm.
that's helpful to begin to see how are our needs being met or are they not being met? And if they're not being met, what emotion is that? And then as parents, how can we address those unmet needs and help our kids learn about it?
And the same thing goes for the parent.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you were saying, the in the work that we do at Chai, everybody's needs matter, the
Mm-hmm.
parents as well as the kids. And as I said, behavior or any sort of negative behavior is a sign of an unmet need. So we have to get to we call it root to bloom, where we get to the root of the process, and see like what's happening and, what led to this. If the child's having a full on meltdown, at that point, there have been probably several unmet needs. And now it has just escalated to a full on tantrum because there's no communication, the need keeps being unmet, and now it's a meltdown.
Yeah. And I've noticed that so many of these meltdowns, especially with younger ones, occur over simple things like lack of sleep, lack of food, lack of quiet, all those things that or going from one, transitions from one to another. It's so hard, to get that 2-year-old out of their toy area into the car, I mean,
Mhm.
a major feat for that to happen. And that's during transition. So if we can start noticing where our kids have these meltdowns, what's behind it all, that helps us set up a function, or can't think of the word I'm trying to say right now, but set it up so that we can find a way to help them move through that in a calmer way.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to keep talking about mindful parenting. I'm here with Cheryl Blackington, certified mindfulness expert. You're listening to the Awakened Parent Project, and we'll be right back. Hey, everybody, we're back. This is the Awakened Parent Project. I'm Susan Dolci. We're talking today with Cheryl Blackington about mindful parenting. And before we get on to the last segment, and I can't wait to say the thing I'm going to say because you were instrumental in this, but can you remind people of your website?
Yes, it's mindful-muse, MEUS.
Thanks. Wonderful. And you have a bunch of classes. I don't know if we have a taker yet on the free class, but if you are watching this after the show, if you go to the show description on Transformation Talk Radio, there is a link to her page that lists all the classes that she does offer. So check that out. So I remember when I was in your mindful parenting class, I think it was like 2 years ago. Maybe it was 3. Who knows? There was a pandemic in the middle.
Yeah.
But you had a phrase, and I still use this phrase all the time. And I'm sure it's probably used by a lot of people, but you were the first person I ever heard say it. And I was like, that is brilliant. And it was name it to tame it, feel it to heal it. I was like, that's brilliant, because that's the only way you're going to get past a trigger, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I actually borrowed that from Dan Siegel, who's a really famous therapist, researcher, speaker on mindfulness and mindful parenting. And I have a lot of his books that are brilliant as far as he loves to rhyme, he loves acronyms, he likes ways to help people remember. So the name it to tame it and feel it to heal it really gets down to really the gist of how do we go about parenting when our kids are in meltdown or having trouble, or we are for that matter. So the idea is the first thing you have to do is you have to really just connect with your child and get eye level, get at their same eye level, listen to them, be present with them, and establish that emotional connection, and then name that feeling. As soon as I often think of when a little child is hurt and they come running over to their parents and they're just all in tears, and you might say, you fell down, I bet that hurts. And they go, yes. And the next thing you know, they go trotting off happy. Now this is what little ones do, not older ones. So we just recognized for them and honored them by noticing what was going on with them. And so often that's all they need. And then feel it to heal it is that other piece of naming that emotion. So we label it, and then where do you feel it? Is it, and then the child that's hurt their knee, of course it's there, but not using that example. Where does it feel in your heart, in your tummy? Where do you feel it? And those are ways that we can just easily teach our kids, to name the emotion and to feel where it lives in their bodies and normalize that emotion. That's all it is. It's just an emotion. It comes and it goes, and it doesn't stay forever. And so often we feel like, oh my God, I'm going to be sad forever, angry forever, feel alone forever, but that's just a temporary piece that mindfulness teaches us. No, it's coming and going, just like the weather or the clouds.
Emotion, energy, and motion.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what I like about what you just said too is that to get comfortable with the discomfort of some emotions that like you said, it's going to pass. I remember working with my youngest daughter when she was going through a time where she was having some really bad anxiety, and knowing that it was chemicals in her brain, going haywire or flooding her brain with hormones, that it was going to pass. And so if she could just find a way to, get into her body until everything calmed down, then she was going to be okay. And that was hugely instrumental in getting her to deal with the panic attacks.
Absolutely. And I know I'm one who struggled with anxiety too. And just naming it like that and understanding where it's going on in your body. And that, once we acknowledge it, we still want to often tend to chase it away. It's like, okay, there you are, now go.
Mhm.
And this
Yep.
idea of being with is no, we are being with just like we're holding our children when they're upset or sad or frustrated. We're with them until they're feeling better, until they feel calmer or more balanced. And that's the same for us. We can stay with ourselves, lean into that difficulty instead of what we tend to do is run away, hide, drink too much, smoke, or whatever those behaviors are that try to stuff down these emotions that we don't think are acceptable. And we know that produces a lot of negativity and bad effects in our lives.
So what other practices do you recommend for parents when they're
Yeah.
practicing mindful parenting?
One of the simplest things, I mean, there's so many, but I'll just start with something that is helpful for really busy people like parents, where you might not have time to sit in your Zen moment for half an hour, and that just might not be in your wheelhouse. So we call them mindful moments. So the idea that what is something that you do over and over and over again, often on autopilot, like we wash our hands, we brush our teeth, we take a shower, we feed our baby. What is it that we do over and over and over again? And can we bring mindfulness to that moment? Can we really fully be there? And especially when you think about if you're nursing your baby or you're feeding your baby, so often the parent has a cell phone over here or they're on the phone while they're, and it's like, no, this is your chance to connect with your child, to really fully be present with yourself and your child. So it's just sometimes doing that, or if it's washing your hand, every time you wash your hands, you take 5 deep, slow breaths and you just really feel your hands, feel the soap, feel the warmth of the water, and all of those sensory inputs. So that's one I would recommend for any busy parent. If we do that periodically throughout the day, every time we wash our hands, we're bringing ourselves every time back into the moment. They say that we spend half of our day as adults out of body, not, just total autopilot, which is kind of scary when you think
Yeah.
about it. And that's where we live. Um, Another one, when you're feeling your feet, for instance, when you're
Mhm.
standing at the sink or you're walking, can we slow and just feel what our feet feel like, supporting us? Another one that's really helpful is called soothing touch. And we teach this in mindful self-compassion as well. And it's the idea of recognizing when we're sad, recognizing when we're suffering, recognizing when we're having a rough time. So that name it to tame it is there. Like, I'm sad, there's sadness here, there's frustration here. Like, oh, I'm going to scream. So naming that and then allowing ourselves to feel it and then think about what do we need. And it might be just soothing touches when you maybe take your hands and you hold them, or you hold your, just support your face and just take a few breaths there, or you put your hands on your heart. We guide people through on your belly, maybe belly and heart. So just that few moments of slowing down, taking a breath, getting in body are really, really helpful to do periodically throughout the day, and continually being kind to ourselves as we go through our day. It's rough. It's a rough job being a parent. It's wonderful, but it's rough and frustrating at times.
It's exhausting work, and I have 3 adult daughters, and I don't think it ever stops being exhausting work. um, I liked what you said about the hand washing thing. I did that when my kids were little, doing dishes. Like that was my time to just, like be in the process of washing dishes, and, feeling the hot water and the suds and all that. But I remember when I was really, really struggling, I have a couple minutes left, when I was really struggling when they were little and still kind of like trying to, I would left the corporate world to be a stay-at-home mom. Don't regret that decision at all. But, that was a huge shift for me. And I was like, well, like what's my job now besides taking care of babies? And I decided that it was to, it's probably going to sound hokey, but I was going to infuse love into everything. So I tried to do everything with as much presence as possible, like cook a meal or fold the laundry or wash the dishes, not maybe changing a diaper. Didn't really need to be present during that. But it really does make a difference because it keeps you anchored or it makes it easier to anchor in the present moment the more you do it. So if you're in the middle of a tantrum or an argument or whatever, if you practice it enough, it's easy to come back to that presence.
Right. And it builds that sense of resilience, this idea that, oh, I can do this. I can be successful at this. I've got my whole self here that I can work with and respond with a place of more calm than reactivity.
So is there we have well, I was going to say we have a minute left, but we don't. We have probably about 30 seconds left. Cheryl, thank you so much for being here today. I adore you. I adore the work that you do. You can find out more about Cheryl's classes at mindful-muse.com. That's Muse, MEUS. And she has several different sorts of youth classes, and she has mindful parenting classes. I've taken them. I've taken her mindful parenting class. It was fantastic. So I totally recommend her.
Yeah, I would just say that we do have our fall class starting at the end of October. I think it's the 26th on a Tuesday, and it's a 3-week series. So they can either find out that at my website or at Grand Rapids Center for Mindfulness.
Great. Thank you so much, Cheryl. So remember, as I stated in the beginning, parenting isn't about perfection. You're human. That's impossible. But conscious parenting is about allowing your children to be your awakening. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for being a part of the Awakened Parent Project. My goal with this show is to help us all become more compassionate and engaged parents by diving into the many techniques and ideologies of the conscious parenting community. This is a safe space to embark on a practical and spiritual journey of self-exploration and expand our ideas about conscious parenting. Got thoughts, questions, ideas? I want to hear from you. Reach out to me if there's a topic you'd like to hear covered on the show, or to share your conscious parenting story by visiting susandolci.com.